Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar called Workzone Safety for Police Officer Details. Training is being provided to help improve workplace safety for police officers who work traffic details on main streets and back roads in cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth. Today's presenters are myself, Steve Daigle, and Kevin McHugh. I am the Safety and Health Inspector with the Massachusetts Department of Labor Standards. The Department of Labor Standards conducts workplace accident investigations and workplace safety audits with the goal of preventing work-related injury to cities and towns and state employees.
My name is Kevin McHugh. I am an instructor with the Municipal Police Training Committee, certified instructor in traffic control, and I'm also a retired police officer from the town of Braintree.
This training session uses resources from the Federal Highway Administration, the National Highway Institute, MassDOT, and the American Traffic Safety Services Association. The purpose of this training is to keep officers safe at work zone details. This training focuses on traffic details at road construction sites. The training does not include stops or traffic control at accident scenes.
By the end of this presentation, you should be able to do the following. Understand how a work zone is set up, including the required signs and cones. Determine the best place to position yourself to reduce the risk of accident or injury, and identify the required high visibility reflective clothing. Why is this important to you? In Massachusetts, we have had several officers recently struck by construction equipment. In June of 2016, a Norton officer was struck by an excavator. In May of 2016, a Milford officer was struck by a skid steer loader. June of 2013, a Norwell officer was struck by a front-end loader. And in July of 2012, a Westfield officer was fatally struck by a dump truck. Let's start with the role of the traffic detail officer. By definition, the primary mission of a traffic detail officer is to ensure the safe flow of traffic around lane closures and obstructions caused by construction. Good traffic control will protect the construction crew, public works crew, motorists, pedestrians, and the police. It's important to note that the contractor is responsible for the overall site safety and safety of the construction workers. Officer is responsible for traffic safety and public safety. This training will show why the site in this photograph is not set up correctly for traffic safety, worker safety, or officer safety.
A work zone has 4 sections. Every officer assigned to a work zone traffic detail should understand what a good work zone looks like. This diagram is from Part 6 of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. It is also commonly referred to as the MUTCD. This diagram shows an overview of the 4 major sections of a work zone. The first section is called Advanced Warning. This is a sign, such as workers ahead or officer ahead. It gives motorists a signal that they should be ready to slow down. The next section is called the Transition Area, or Transition Taper. This area contains cones to mark a lane closure. The third section is called the Construction Work Area. This is where the construction activity is happening. Construction equipment and crew are located here. It is worth noting that for the earlier slide that showed the list of officer injuries, all of the officers had been standing in this section of the work zone when they were struck. The last section is called the Termination Taper. This taper brings traffic flow back to the original lane. Area 1, the advanced warning area. Now we're going to explain each section in more detail, starting with the advanced warning area. The advanced warning area warns motorists about the situation ahead and the action that the driver will be required to take. Signs prepare the motorist to react. Note the red box in this diagram. All of the signs are placed before the cones that will show the start of the taper for the lane closure. The advanced warning area on busy roads usually contains 3 signs. The first sign gets the motorist's attention, something such as road work ahead. The second sign tells the problem with words, lane closed ahead or road closed ahead. The third sign uses the diagram to show the motorists what they will need to do. The spacing of the signs depends upon the road speed and terrain, such as curves or hills, that block the motorist from seeing the officer or the construction site. In a perfect world, there will be 3 warning signs. We understand that you do not work in a perfect world. If you are a traffic detail officer, there should be at least 1 warning sign posted. If there is no warning sign in place, the motorist's response time can be greatly affected. So once again, because it's important, at every work zone detail you do, there should be at least 1 advance warning sign. If there is no warning sign at all, then the officer, crew, and public could be at risk. A warning sign is an extremely important step. See the difference between a motorist following the flow of the lane closure or driving into the work zone. The next section we're going to talk about is the transition taper. That means that the lane gets closed by a gradual taper. Several cones are used to mark a gradual lane closure. Transition taper is mandatory. It is not optional. It provides an important visual path for motorists and reduces driver confusion. A long gradual taper is better than a short taper. It gives more time for the motorist to react and provides a more natural flow to the traffic. On the right is a diagram from the MassDOT flipbook. In this diagram, visualize a car at the bottom of the page where the arrows are, driving up to the top of the page. At the bottom, the driver first sees that there is a road work ahead sign. Right lane closed ahead. Then orange cones begin a taper to gradually close the right lane. Red box in the diagram outlines the transition taper area. More cones are better than 1 or 2 cones. Lots of cones create a visual line to keep motorists away from the construction area. Helps to facilitate a smooth merger.
Transition taper critique. Let's take a look at a sample setup in a typical Massachusetts town. We have a tree crew cutting branches from a bucket truck. We have a traffic detail officer posted at the site. We have 3 goals at this site. Keep the officer safe, prevent cars from hitting the bucket truck, and manage the oncoming traffic in both directions that now need to share 1 lane. How would you set up this site to accomplish these 3 goals? Based on the prior slides, think about these questions. Do you see an advanced warning sign? Did you see cones to taper the lane closure? This site would be safer for both the officer and the bucket truck crew if there was an advanced warning sign and more cones to taper the lane closure. A good rule of thumb is that if you can only see 4 cones, it isn't enough. Area 3, the constructions area. The third area of the work zone is called the construction area. This is the area where the work is being done and construction equipment is in motion. The red box in this diagram shows that the construction area is split into 2 sections, the workspace and the buffer space. At the beginning of this training, we showed a list of offices that had all been injured by construction equipment. The blue stars indicate where the offices had been standing when they were struck by the construction equipment. Buffer zone. Going to talk about the buffer zone first. The buffer space protects the construction crew from motorist mistakes. Red box in this diagram shows the buffer space. It starts at the point where the full lane closure is achieved and extends up to the active construction work area. The important thing to remember is that the buffer space stays empty. The construction crew should not park vehicles here. The detail officer should not park a vehicle here also. The only vehicle that would be expected to be seen in this area is a crash extenuator or possibly an unoccupied blocker vehicle serving as a replacement for the crash attenuator. The length of the buffer depends on the road speed. Faster roads should have a long buffer, and low-speed roads will have a shorter buffer.
Now let's talk about the work area itself. This is where the construction crew and equipment are located and where the construction work is happening. The work area can contain moving equipment and machinery that could injure a police officer. For this reason, officers should not be located in the construction area. Only construction workers who have been trained in the hazards of the work being performed should be in the active construction area. They are focused only on the activity in the work area and are not paying attention to traffic while within this area.
Blind spots. You need to be careful of all blind spots. All vehicles and construction equipment have blind spots. That means that the equipment operator cannot see you. Even if he wants to see you, he can't. The photo in this slide shows red stripes to outline the blind spot in the backhoe. The operator cannot see anyone standing in this red area. That means that traffic detail officers should follow these guidelines. Do not stand in a blind spot. Do not stand next to construction equipment. And do not stand watching the hole. That means you should not be inside the construction area looking down into a trench. Also, be careful of swing radiuses. In addition to blind spots, all excavation and hoisting equipment have a swing radius. Do not stand next to a rotating equipment. A short stubby arrow in this photo shows that the cab of this loader can rotate beyond the footprint of its tracks. The long swooping arrows show that the pipes being hoisted can swing as well. Equipment can rotate and hoisted loads can move suddenly. This means traffic detail officers should not only stay out of the work area, they should not stand next to the construction area because the moving equipment inside could move beyond the work area without warning. Communicating with the operators. Construction crews have a protocol for talking to an equipment operator. You need to enter an area where there is a piece of equipment, wait for a pause in the action, make direct eye contact with the operator, then wait for a clear signal that it is safe to approach. Eye contact with the operator is critical. If you do not have eye contact with the operator, you should assume that the operator cannot see you.
Now that we've covered the construction work area, let's talk a little bit about the termination taper. This is the last section of the work zone setup. Termination taper has cones to show motorists that the lane closure is over. When a termination taper is not provided, then each motorist must decide on their own whether or not the closed lane is now open. And we all know that motorists can make strange decisions. Merge back too early and drive right into the construction crew. They could merge back too late and cause a vehicle coming the other way to strike a police officer on the other side of the road. Red box on this diagram shows a long taper with red dashed lines. It shows a short taper with the orange dotted lines. Again, more cones are always better. The taper should be long and gradual on high-speed roads. Motorists behave best when they are given clear instructions. Cones and signs for the advance warning area, transition taper, construction area, and termination taper all work together to give the motorist clear visual instructions. How many signs and cones We just talked about the types of signs and cones that are necessary for road construction. A natural question is, how many cones do we need? The traffic detail officer does not need to have an exact answer for this. It's the contractor's responsibility to have this answer. The contractor is the primary party responsible for site safety and worker safety. The contractor is required to plan ahead for how many cones and signs are needed. To make this plan, the contractor can look at the MassDOT flipbook and the MUTCD for diagrams. However, we've all seen sites that are set up poorly. Since the officer is responsible for traffic safety and public safety, the officer can reject the setup if there is a serious lack of signs or cones. The officer can ask for more warning signs and cones to protect traffic and public. If the contractor argues that there are enough cones already, the officer can simply ask the contractor to prove it by showing the proper diagram and spacing chart in either the MassDOT flipbook or the MUTCD.
We'll talk about high visibility clothing. Next part of keeping an officer safe is high visibility clothing. High visibility reflective clothing is mandatory. It is mandatory at all times, both day and night. Keep vests and jackets fully zipped so that the reflective stripes cover your entire torso. High visibility clothing is designed to keep you visible from a 360-degree view. There should be a reflective stripe all the way around your torso, and there should be a reflective stripe at your shoulders. The officers in this photo are wearing ANSI Class 2 vests. Lettering that says police is optional, but the reflective stripes are mandatory.
Now that we've talked about the proper components of a work zone, let's critique a work zone setup. The photo above shows a typical Massachusetts town. We have a road crew using a backhoe to dig through the asphalt and a bobcat to move debris. We have a traffic detail officer posted at the site. As you look at this picture, what can be done to make this work zone safer for the officer, the public, and everyone else involved? Think of the four areas. Does the site have advanced warning signs? Does the site have enough cones to close the lane of traffic that is blocked and signal a safe merge? Does the site have enough cones to mark the perimeter of the work area? And does the site have enough cones to taper traffic back to the original travel lane? In this picture, we can see that there are some problems. Let's see what we can do to improve it. How about putting at least one advance warning sign in each direction of travel to alert the motorists that work is ahead? Then, adding some cones to provide a gradual taper before the lane that is blocked. And still more cones to mark the entire work area and equipment staging area. And also, some additional cones to show the end taper and let motorists know they can return to the normal traffic pattern. The officer position is also something we always want to think about. Where is the best place to stand in order to see traffic from both directions, not be near construction equipment, and have an escape route? The yellow star in the photo shows the best place for the officer to stand. At this position, the officer can see traffic in both lanes of travel. At this position, the officer is not in the path of active traffic travel. And in this position, the officer has a low risk of being struck by moving construction equipment.
Where should the officer not stand? The next few slides, we are going to illustrate the best place for the officer to stand. But first, we're going to talk about places where the officer should not stand, because there are some spots that are high risk for an officer to get struck by vehicles or equipment. First, don't stand on the edge of the construction area. Do not straddle the cones marking the construction area. In this position, you could be in a blind spot or swing radius and can be struck by construction equipment. If your attention is on traffic, you are at risk of being struck by construction equipment. And if your attention is on the construction equipment, you may be at a higher risk of being struck by traffic. Second, do not stand inside the construction area or the buffer area. At this spot, you could be struck by equipment or a truck that is backing up. Third, do not stand in the path of moving traffic. Motorists may not be able to navigate the lane closure and could hit you. Distracted drivers might not see you or understand your instructions. Stand where you can be seen and see, or stand where you can see and be seen, and always have an escape route. Where should you stand? This diagram shows a typical two-lane road that has one lane of travel in each direction. The best scenario is to use two offices, one positioned at the front of the work zone and one at the end. The offices should be positioned on the shoulder out of the active lanes. At both of these places, you have an escape route and you can see traffic in both directions. The blue arrow at the bottom shows the location for Officer 1. Officer 1 should be located at the beginning of the taper that closes the travel lane. The officer should stand on the shoulder and out of the path of traffic. The green arrow shows the location of Officer 2. Officer 2 should be located at the end of the work zone. The best place for this officer to stand is at the end of the work zone, opposite the end taper that shows motorists to return back to their original lane. The officer should stand on the shoulder, out of the path of traffic. This means you are not standing inside the construction area. Now, what happens on a curve? This diagram illustrates a construction area located on a curve. It is a two-lane road with one lane of traffic in each direction, separated by a yellow line. The best scenario is to use two offices, one positioned at the front of the work zone and one at the end. The blue arrow shows that Officer 1 should be located at the beginning of the taper that closes the travel lane. The officer should stand on the shoulder, out of the path of traffic. The green arrow shows that Officer 2 should be located at the end of the work zone. The officer should stand on the shoulder, out of the path of traffic. Standing on the shoulder gives the officer an escape route. This setup will require radio contact. Line of sight is best, but if that is not possible, then radio contact is a must. Again, do not stand inside the construction area or on the edge of the construction area. These are two high-risk locations for getting struck by motorists or construction equipment. Protection for only one officer. In this scenario, there is a two-lane road and each lane has a different direction of travel. The right lane is closed. This is similar to the photo of the bucket truck activity we saw at the beginning of this training session. This type of setup is only recommended on low-volume roads with small work areas where the officer is comfortable that the traffic can be easily managed from a safe position. The blue arrow shows that the officer should be located on the shoulder directly opposite or across from the work area. This will allow the officer to see traffic approaching from both directions and signal instructions to those officers. Standing on the shoulder keeps the officer out of the path of motorist traffic and the path of moving construction equipment. Now, with two lanes in the same direction. In this scenario, there is a road with two lanes of traffic, and both lanes are traveling in the same direction. In this situation, the officer's role is to provide a police presence to slow traffic speeds. The officer should be located in the far shoulder at the beginning of the traffic taper. This will allow the officer to maintain adequate visibility to provide a police presence without being directly exposed to construction and traffic hazards. The officer should not be located at the perimeter edge of the construction area.
Let's talk about the possibility of closing the road. Many times the best method to reduce the risk is to close the road entirely. Closing the road should be considered as a default first choice whenever feasible. This makes the construction area safest for everyone involved, the construction, our public works crew, the police, and the motorists. Another scenario might be a highway lane closure. Some city and town police officers are assigned to work details on larger roads, like Route 9 or Route 1. These two slides are provided in case you are assigned to a highway location. The purpose of a police vehicle at a highway work zone is slow traffic. Slower traffic speeds are necessary for motorists to achieve successful mergers and lane closures. Slower traffic is necessary for the construction crew so the cars do not hit the crew or construction equipment. The MUTCD is very specific about where the police vehicles should be located. First, police vehicles should be after the first advance warning sign. Motorists should see a sign like road work ahead before they see a police vehicle. In this diagram, the police vehicle is parked right after the sign and before the next two signs. Second, the police vehicle should always be on the shoulder or median. This diagram shows the police vehicle is parked on the grass to the right of the breakdown lane. Parking on the median is designed to keep the police out of the path of a distracted driver. It also keeps the police vehicle out of the path of an upstream motorist who comes up on a merge too fast and needs to evade into a breakdown lane. If a guardrail is present, you may be able to use the guardrail as a physical barrier between your vehicle and the road. Third, the police vehicle should not be located inside the taper that provides lane closure. A motorist who is not prepared for the lane closure could crash into the police vehicle. You'll also notice in this diagram that the police vehicle is not inside the construction work area or buffer area. Additional tips for a highway detail. This slide has two diagrams. Let's look at the one on the left first. You should never straddle lanes in a work zone setup. This forces motorists around you in a partial lane and increases the risk for an accident. Now let's look at the diagram on the right. The police vehicle is parked in the breakdown lane opposite the construction. This is called a split scene because it is very confusing to motorists. It forces traffic flow past two obstructions and increases the risk for an accident.
Now we'll talk about the relationship with contractors. Beginning of this training session, we reviewed that the contractor has primary responsibility for site safety and worker safety. The role of the traffic detail officer is to keep a safe flow of traffic around lane closures caused by the road construction. You have the authority to request more signs and cones. You have the authority to shut down a site if you think there are not enough signs and cones for traffic safety. Contractors should be able to prove to you that there are enough cones by showing you a chart in the MassDOT flipbook or the MUTCD. Contact your supervisor if you have a disagreement with the contractor.
So, the goal of this training session was to try and keep detail officers safe at work zone sites. We discussed the four parts of a work zone and required signs and cones. We went over the best place for the officer to be positioned in order to reduce the risk of being struck by a motorist or construction equipment. And we reviewed high visibility reflective clothing. We want to thank you for participating in this training. We hope that this will help you reduce the risk for injury at a work zone traffic detail. Please contact us if you have any suggestions to improve the training. Email any feedback. Safe Public Workplace, state.ma.us.